This was the second time Mo Black opened his eyes for the first time. It took him a few moments to collect his thoughts. His eyelids stuck together as he blinked. His back was sore beyond comprehension, and above all, he was experiencing the worst headache he could remember at the time. Nonetheless, he sat up and surveyed his surroundings. The overwhelming sense of déjà vu was enough to make him even more nauseous than he already was. "This isn't the first draft of this part of the essay," he said suddenly and to himself. It was the only explanation that made sense. How else could it all be so familiar? The cold and soft earth under a carpet of brilliant emerald green grass, the rolling hills that flowed down to a crystal clear lake, the tiny lakeside town, the only sign of buildings for miles in any direction, and its one road leading in and out of the village. Even the stillness of the air and the warmth of the bright white sun in the sky was all too similar to what had come before to go unnoticed.
Mo Black, you're awake. I was beginning to think that all you did was sleep,
said a mysterious, curious, enigmatical, sphinx-like voice.
If you'd slept for any longer, I might have changed my mind and summoned the shield hero instead.
That exact list of pretentious adjectives, definitely ripped from thesaurus.com, was also just as familiar. This time, if that was something that could even be said, Mo knew the source of the voice was not at all mysterious, curious, enigmatical, or even, to be frank, sphinx-like. It should be, if memory served, a ridiculously proportioned woman with rainbow hair and the power of a goddess radiating from her pale skin. There was no denying it. After the many months Mo Black had spent perfecting the art of online essay writing, he'd finally done it. He'd finally achieved the legendary power of return by draft. In exchange for writing the perfect anime crit essay, at every draft change he was fated to be reborn into his work, living through each and every edit in person until the essay's completion. It was a heavy price to pay, a burden that he would shoulder for the rest of time. This power was his fish to fry, his whale to catch, his seafood metaphor to make into gas station sushi. Alone, soloed, unaccompanied, by himself, so tortured, so troubled. Wow. Mo finally turned to address his interlocutor. "You don't mean that, do you, goddess? I'm sure my abilities are far more suited to the task at hand than that other guy's."
So you're already aware that I'm a goddess?
The woman replied.
Very impressive. I suppose this is but a fraction of the true power of the bullshit hero.
Mo winced. Again with that name. The goddess cocked an eyebrow.
Again? How do you mean? I've seen you plenty of times, but this is our first time meeting face to face, as far as I'm aware. You've never heard me call you that name.
Well, that's both right and wrong, ma'am. First, I don't really need my throat vision to figure out what's going on. I've obviously been summoned here to another world by a goddess who, despite her immense cosmic power, still needs some low-life 20-something self-loathing weeb trash to save her whole planet or universe or dimension or something from an existential threat. The goddess's face turned sour.
You're more or less correct, but I could do without your smug attitude.
It's part of the package. More to the point, we've had this conversation before in a version of this introduction the audience will never read. I came back to this moment with the power of return by... Time ground to a standstill as fear itself closed its fingers around his heart. The taste of blood crept up his throat. He couldn't finish that sentence if he tried.
What parts of a lone, solo, unaccompanied, by himself did you not understand?
I guess I can't tell you. I'll try not to make a big deal of it.
Noted.
The goddess took a step back, adjusted her skirt, then swung her arm in a crisp, sweeping motion. The sky got darker, even without clouds blocking the sun. The air was cold too, almost too thin to breathe.
Mo Black, the bullshit hero.
I'd still like a do-over on the name. How about a cool and popular internet essayist?
Silence!
The goddess's voice boomed with a force strong enough to flatten the grass at Mo's feet.
I'd be inclined to dispense with the trite, even under less pressing circumstances. Nevertheless, to say I'll forego the sex comedy chicanery, which typically heralds the first 100 seconds of any character's given introduction sequence. I'll also resist the urge to brandish any valueless baka, tsundere clamoring, or the particular neurosis that concerns itself with callbacks to the utterly mundane. I'll allow other deranged prospectors to stake claim on whether I've gained the attention of senpai, regardless of whether a being as powerful as myself would ever even have a need for such a thing. My introduction will be sparse. There will be no majestic prose blustering into the sails of medieval fantasy adventure as we embark on this voyage together, nor will there be any ham-fisted prose whipping its tentacles from across the salty ocean waves of another fucking beach episode. For that matter, I won't set the stage or dim the lights. The mood, you see, will be set soon enough.
Sure?
I am the queen of kings of dimensions infinite. I am the keeper of waifus. I am the satisfier of wish fulfillment. I am the guardian of portals and summonings abound. I am the shepherd of forced JRPG mechanics, then the herald of overpowered protagonists across all universes and possible fanfiction timelines. I am Sakana, goddess of Isekai, and it is your destiny to save this world from its assured destruction.
Chapter 1. Bullshit. What even is Isekai anyway? You're pretty spot on for the anime goddess archetype, aren't you? But your outfit isn't very goddess-like, you know? The bones in Mo's wrists screamed for relief from Sakana's iron grip. Mo wasn't quite sure where she was dragging him exactly, but she seemed to be in a hurry. It's almost as if the person who drew you wanted you to look a little like Restarte from Cautious Hero, but then realized he sucks at art too much to actually draw a decent royal-looking outfit and too broke to hire someone who can. She ignored him.
You will use your trope vision to find the anime responsible for corrupting my domain. Then I'll use the full extent of my power, the light of social justice, to eliminate them from existence once and for all. It is the only way for Isekai as a genre to survive for the years to come.
And what do I get out of it? Mo asked.
In return, I will allow you to return to your own world unscathed.
Finally, the goddess let go of his wrist. With her power, she summoned a bright white ball of energy in the middle of the field.
This is the summoning seed. Through it, you will be able to see every isekai in existence, past and present. Use your trope vision on the summoning seed and find me the anime responsible for ruining isekai.
Right, okay. Mo blinked. Wait, hold on. I can't. At least not yet? I mean...
What now? What possible reason could you have for hesitating?
Well, like, I just think it's kind of overgeneralizing to say that an entire genre is doomed to crappy stories, you know? The format, well, reincarnation as a plot device has a lot of potential. If anything, isekai is just popular right now, and we're getting more isekai in general, both good and bad. How do you know you're not blowing things out of proportion? The goddess looked more than a little displeased, but she complied with Mo's request. A small ball of energy left the summoning seed and floated its way over to him. Oh, it's so cute. Ooh.
That's because it hasn't been made into an anime yet.
Mo scratched his head. Wait, this little ball of energy is a medium?
Correct.
Sakana flicked her wrist, and the little ball met Mo at eye level.
This particular one happens to be reborn as a vending machine. I now wander the dungeon.
Even at his level of mastery of all things bullshit, Mo's brain couldn't seem to wrap itself around that one. Reborn as a what now?
The light novel follows its titular protagonist who, after being crushed to death by a vending machine, is reincarnated as a sentient vending machine in a fantasy dungeon world. Shortly after, he meets and befriends Lamis, a young female hunter who names him Boxo, and starts carrying him around on her back. And the two start their adventures in the dungeon together. Reborn as a vending machine has received positive reception from reviewers, with particular praise being directed at the novel's unique take on the isekai genre.
Would you like a peek inside the light novels?
Sakana asked, a smug grin on her face. Not really, but I know you're gonna make me anyway.
Right again.
Finally over how asinine this premise is, and feeling a rush of adrenaline from borrowing the goddess's ability to consume any piece of media instantaneously, Mo's face broke out into a wide smile. You know, thematically speaking, this story ain't so bad, he said. The vending machine needs money to survive and to progress through his magical skill tree. Meanwhile, the big titty huntress Lolly needs food to survive. They need each other. It's a simple, symbiotic relationship, and a perfect, practical example of mutual aid. Consider, if you will, the duality of man. In Plato's... Sakana slapped Mo in the back of the head hard enough to steal the breath from his lungs.
Do not defend this garbage. I forbid it.
Okay, fine. Ow. I guess I can see what you mean. Isekai has a reputation of being kind of a yikes genre, and it's not exactly an unfounded belief either.
So you will help me?
I will, but if you want my help, Mo smiled. We're taking this from the beginning. Sakana frowned.
What do you mean, from the beginning?
Well, let's start with a few questions. What exactly is an isekai anyway? And what does it mean thematically when a story transports its protagonist from the ordinary world to another world?
I was afraid you'd say something like that.
Sakana said with a roll of her eyes. I can't stress how bizarre isekai is as compared to most genres of fiction in any medium. Imagine if every RPG was just Pokemon. Like, not in the sense that RPGs are similar currently, pretty much all of them share a leveling system, skills, items, and turn-based mechanics. But I mean, what if they were all literally Pokemon? What if they all took place in a small utopian region with a few small towns and one or two big cities where people and monsters live side by side and fight in battles? Imagine if every RPG that came out had a 10-year-old protagonist that was expected to go on a quest to meet all the monsters of this world and beat 8 bosses, an Elite Four, and a champion. Imagine if the genre was so saturated with this format that new games coming to the market now make jokes about how all RPGs are the same. And yet, this is the state of isekai in 2019, 2020. See, this essay takes place in a set point in time, but I wrote it over an interval of months, and it's kind of been delayed, so... Weird how narratives be like that. So, what is an isekai anyway? The most common definition, given the fact that isekai is just Japanese for otherworld, is any story where the protagonist leaves the real world for some other world or dimension where the rules of reality have significantly changed. Of course, on that alone, we'd have to admit isekai is neither new or even all that Japanese. I mean, this is just Alice in Wonderland, or more specifically, Alice's Adventures Underground, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and the sequel, Through the Looking Glass, published by British author Lewis Carroll between 1865 and 1881. Alice in Wonderland has entered the English lexicon as a series of expressions that literally refer to the experience of being sent to another world. If someone's in Wonderland, or you ever want to see how deep the rabbit hole goes, or if it was like you were through the looking glass, everyone knows what you're talking about, even without having read the source material. If we're looking to understand other world stories, it'd honestly be criminal not to start here. I don't speak Japanese. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll focus on Alice's Adventures Underground and Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. The two are the same story, the latter just republished by Lewis Carroll with added scenes as the story moved from manuscript to print. The thing about Alice's Adventures in Wonderland is that, for the most part, the plot doesn't actually matter. It's a story for children, after all. I think I read these and Through the Looking Glass when I was like 9 or 11 or something. The original story has the title character, Alice, a young child, follow a talking white rabbit with a pocket watch down a rabbit hole, which transports her from her ordinary rural life into a fantastical other world. Here, everything she eats either makes her grow larger or smaller, animals talk, playing cards come to life, and everything is just a little bit off. It's a world out of a child's daydream. Alice meets an entire cast of characters which later go on to become some of the most iconic beings in fantasy. There's the White Rabbit, who's always in a rush, the Mad Hatter, who's stuck in a moment in time. She meets a Dormouse, a talking caterpillar who's constantly hitting a bong, and a Red Queen of Hearts who demands everyone around her who does something even slightly wrong be executed. The story basically mixes these characters and some wacky antics around for a few thousand words until it's revealed it was all a dream Alice had. Sort of.
If it was all a dream, genre savviness tells us that's one sure way of saying nothing in the story matters.
It's an assumption we usually assert to be true, replied Mo. Sakana rubbed her chin.
Okay, Mo. I'll go with your intuition here just this once and say there is more to this story than meets the eye. We'll say that Lewis Carroll was a competent enough an author to not purposefully diminish the impact of his own narrative with an overdone cliché. At the end of the story, the fact that Alice wakes up, the fact that she returns to the real world from Wonderland and leaves us with two worlds side by side, it would be worth finding out how the real world and the other world speak to each other.
Both versions of the story end with Alice's older sister and guardian dozing off herself. She finds herself within Alice's dream, listening to someone recount the story of Alice's adventures to a new generation of children. In Alice's Adventures in the Underground, it reads, "Then Alice's sister thought, in a dream within the dream as it were, how this same little Alice would, in the after-time, be herself a grown woman, and how she would keep, through her riper years, the simple and loving heart of her childhood, and how she would gather around her other little children, and make their eyes bright and eager with many a wonderful tale, perhaps even with these very adventures of the little Alice of long ago, and how she would feel with all their simple sorrows, and find a pleasure in all their simple joys, remembering her own child life and the happy summer days."
The story puts an emphasis on the value of fiction for its own sake,
said Sakana.
If anything, the Wonderland story argues that it's because Alice's adventures were a dream of sorts that they are important. It's these kinds of dreams that captivate children and make adults happy alike. If anything, the fact that Wonderland is a quasi-dream and not a more concrete space allows Wonderland to matter more. Wonderland brings joy in the real world because it is a dream. Rather, being a dream is what makes Wonderland matter. The dream makes Wonderland excellent.
Mo nodded in agreement. But there's more to it if we look at Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. That version of the story ends in exactly the same way, with most of the same text, but there are a few sentences added, such as this. So Alice's sister sat on, with closed eyes, and half believed herself in Wonderland, though she knew that she had but to open them again, and all would change to dull reality. So now we've got a second and equally important observation, right? To Alice in Wonderland, not only are fictional other worlds important because they bring happiness to children and adults alike, they allow adults to escape real life and all the problems and boredom simply existing can bring. Hey, isn't Isekai kind of a weird idea if you think about it? The hero's journey, of course, generally calls for the hero out of their ordinary environment to be thrust into the unknown, but the vast majority of stories don't draw explicit attention to the fact that this new environment is fictional or unreal. Most myths and religions maintain that the fantastical elements of the world are already a part of the real world. And most stories just move the character between locations that exist in the same larger overall world. Anytime we consume fiction, whether it be through novels, anime, video games, whatever, we're already leaving the real world to spend time in fiction. What is the narrative purpose of constructing two fictional worlds? One that mirrors reality exactly and one that doesn't. And then pointing to one and saying, this one's real, and to the other, this one's fake. Well, the purpose is to explicitly draw attention to life itself. Adults, unlike children, can't pretend the problems of reality don't affect us. We have work or school and bills and relationships that don't work out and a million other things that our parents can't protect us from anymore. Having an other world in fiction serves to address this fact directly. In a way, Isekai is inherently more political in a way that is separate from the fact that all art is political. It by necessity makes commentary on the material conditions of the world. Sometimes, like in Alice in Wonderland, the commentary is relatively inoffensive. Adult life is boring sometimes. I mean, yeah, okay, sure. But Isekai in anime isn't made for 9-year-olds, it's made for teenagers and adults. What Isekai has to say about the material conditions of life quickly becomes far more complicated.
Well, of course. After all, the archetypal isekai is a little more involved in sending the main character to another world because life sucks.
How would you describe it? Mo asked.
Well, you're the bullshit hero, wouldn't you?
The goddess's cheeks flushed pink with the embarrassment of having to describe her realm's worst tropes and cliches.
Some would say that my genre has a teensy bit of a problem with,
Shut-in, horny male nerd protagonists ages 16 to 22 being transported to another world where they're given overpowered abilities and a harem of beautiful young women, half of which are underaged.
If you knew, then why'd you make me say it?
The goddess paused.
Actually, you're still missing something. Two things, actually. The omission was that, unlike Alice in Wonderland, most isekai don't compare the real world to fiction. They assert the real world has failed and propose fiction as a permanent and superior alternative. The main characters are vessels for self-insertion, not really characters in and of themselves to fit this need.
We'll have to prove it, Mo said. But I think we can work with that idea for now. What's the second?
A huge percentage of modern isekai stories are published on a handful of Japanese internet forums by young, aspiring authors with no professional experience whatsoever.
Syosetsu.com is an anonymous Japanese web novel forum where literally anyone can publish anything, and stories get popular based on the popularity among anonymous users. Sites like Syosetsu.com are where light novel and manga publishers get ideas for books to make. I want to stress how many isekai have been published here and just how low of a barrier to entry there is to throw up a new story. Imagine if a sizable amount of the American publishing industry was just pouring money into browsing Wattpad fanfiction. And then, if they found a story they liked, they'd contact you to rewrite the story as a proper comic book. And if that comic book did well, Paramount or Sony would reach out and make it into a film. That's sort of the state of anime in general, but isekai specifically. The standard model of anime production starts with unconnected nobodies posting all kinds of stories online. This in part explains the similarity of isekai. They come from the same places, from authors who have maybe written like one real story, maybe two. If you ever wonder why all those light novels coming out have long, wordy, and pretentious titles, it's because it's the only way to gain attention on the internet. When everyone's anonymous and there's so much content, No one's going to read a story with a vague title like Falling Stars. But My Beautiful and Busty Childhood Friend Was Reincarnated as a Shooting Star carries the premise of the story with it, as well as the knowledge that it's probably trash. It's more clickable on an internet forum environment. Sakana smirked.
That's funny. The titles of your essays tend to be quite wordy and pretentious, bullshit hero. Curious how that works out.
Well, that's enough analysis on that front, wouldn't you say? How about we move on to an actual isekai, huh? The goddess cracked her knuckles.
I'll do you one better. How about the isekai that launched my domain into infamy? When it comes to 16 to 22-year-old horny shut-in nerds who go to another world, find out they have overpowered abilities, and find themselves surrounded by attractive women, there's one name in the game.
Chapter 2. Bullshit. SAO is an isekai's original sin? I wanna always be with. In online anime circles, SAO is the very definition of trash tier anime made for the common denominator, and liking it is a sure sign of bad taste, inexperience with anime as a medium, or both. At best, you'll see SAO referred to as the gateway anime by online anime mainstays. It's not uncommon for people to regard SAO as literally the worst anime ever made. More relevant to this essay, the popularity of SAO is what most people cite as the reason why isekai is as popular and as terrible as it is today. The theory goes that after SAO came out in 2012 and made a shitload of money, anime production companies have been trying to milk that same cow ever since. The anime itself, though, SAO is, how do I put this?
It sucks.
I mean...
Mo, look at me. Mo.
Yeah?
It sucks.
SAO follows the story of Kirigaya Kazuto, or, as he's referred to online, Kirito. In the real world, Kazuto is a shut-in high schooler with few friends who doesn't stand out in any particular way. Kazuto has always felt disconnected from his family. Finding out he was adopted only made it worse. He instead closes himself off from the outside world and lives through a variety of MMORPGs as Kirito. The time Kirito sinks into playing online games makes him far more talented than the average gamer. Kirito is given an opportunity, along with 1,000 other beta testers, to playtest a new VR MMORPG, virtual reality massively multiplayer online role-playing game, called Sword Art Online. The show begins on launch day of the final version of the game. Kirito's experience with the beta, as well as his general experience with video games, gives him a serious edge over the other players. Just as thousands of players are about to begin their first adventures in this new game, they begin to realize they're no longer able to log out of the system. For reasons unexplained, that headgear they use to play virtual reality games in this story intercept all signals your brain would send to your limbs, so the players are unable to physically remove their headsets. The system also lacks an equivalent of a Control-Alt-Delete or Alt-F4 or pseudo kill-all game or Control-C or, it's fairly contrived. Kaiba Akihiko, the creator of SAO, appears before the players. He declares that from now on, all of the current players of SAO will be trapped in the game until one of the current players clears every boss available in this world. If a player is to run out of health points in the game is programmed to kill them in real life. The first half of the show follows 2 years of struggle as the players organize to beat the game and free themselves from SAO. Dozens of people kill themselves out of fear, stress, or depression. Some players don't buy Kaiba's warning and kill players because they don't think that actually translates to killing a person. Some players kill because they like it. Some players level up to join the front lines in a push to free themselves from the virtual world as soon as possible. Some players support the front lines with skill, strategy, and craftsmanship. Some players focus on surviving. Some players decide to accept their fates and do their best to live a good life in the game. SAO follows Kirito as he navigates his way through every kind of character. As the edgy, overcompetent badass he is, he of course prefers to work alone at least at first. Kirito hides his strength and does his best to blend in with the less powerful players. He joins a party early on for companionship, but after watching them all die one by one, as each of his friends pleaded for their lives, Kirito concludes he's better off alone. That is until he meets a teenage girl named Asuna. She's a loner like him, and the second best SAO player in existence after Kirito. The two go on a few adventures together, fall in love, and promptly get married before having sex. They adopt a kid together, a game construct that was designed to help players with mental issues, but which Kayaba had deactivated to, I guess, spread as much misery as humanly possible. I actually find it especially hilarious how pure and wholesome their relationship is. It's the kind of I married my high school sweetheart fantasy that somehow, despite the show's other numerous flaws, just kind of works. The anime cut a lot of the more overtly sexual parts of the relationship from the source material, so what made it on screen doesn't get so serious and detailed it's creepy, but leaves in just enough that it doesn't feel naive. It's literally just a young guy and girl in a healthy, loving relationship. I joke to myself while watching that Kirito and Asuna are just a happy, modest Muslim couple, but like the show basically makes the joke for me, even if on accident. That's nice. After Kirito defeats the final boss of SAO, Kayaba keeps his promise, destroys the world of SAO, and frees the players from their headsets. Kayaba permanently transmits his consciousness into the dying bits of SAO source code. Around 4,000 players over the span of 2 years were slaughtered in the SAO experience. Hundreds of more people, mostly young kids and teenagers, will forever be scarred by their time in the game. In the game's last moments, Kirito asks Kayaba's consciousness why. Why put so many people through such misery? Smells like bullshit, but okay. The second half of the season focuses on Kirito reconnecting with Asuna outside of the game. The CEO of the company who took over the VR MMORPG scene after the disaster that was SAO, Nobuyuki Sugo, used the end of SAO to keep a handful of players trapped in their comas for his own experiments. Asuna is taken to another game, Alfheim Online. Nobuyuki's goal is to use Kayaba's technology to develop a way around the human mind and to sell that technology to foreign governments. Most notably, the US, interestingly enough. I'll spare you the diatribe about how SAO is pretty consistently against both corporations and government for another time. Anyway, for Asuna, however, Nobuyuki wants Asuna to be his wife, whether she likes it or not. Also, Kirito's sister, did I mention he has a sister? He has a sister. Suguha, who's also his cousin, really wants to fuck her brother. She's like full speed ahead on incest cock, so yeah. SAO as a whole makes some bizarre writing decisions, like some truly weird ones. The dialogue is pretty not great. I mean, I watched the dub, as is my preference, and I had to suffer through what a boardroom thought early 2010 internet slang was like. Throughout the show, Kirito is called a beater because he's a beta tester and he's good at the game, so people think it's cheating. You get it? Beta plus cheater, it's beater. I mean, okay.
Can we talk about how bad this anime is at justifying its premises?
Sakana asked. Given how you can definitely blow me up with your mind or whatever, we can talk about whatever you want. Sakana rolled her eyes.
Sword Art Online spends much of its first few episodes justifying its decisions to you. It spends a lot of time asking, how are they stuck in this game, and what would happen to the stock market if this was real, and other such nonsense. It exhausts narrative energy into answering these questions when the truth is, there are no satisfying answers to such questions because something like this would never happen in real life. No one would wear a headset that interrupts all signals from your brain to the rest of your body. That's clearly dangerous. The logistics of how Kayaba managed to accomplish what he did don't matter. What matters is the emotional and philosophical impact of engineering a mass slaughter of innocent people. Sword Art Online forgets this quite a bit.
I could see that, Mo said. And I'll raise you one more. SAO doesn't seem to understand MMOs for a show about MMOs. It understands why people play them and goes into the emotional aspects of online games, but neither Sword Art Online or Alfheim Online ever feel like they could be real games. Because of that, the fact that every interaction in the virtual world is marked by a menu, stats, and a game mechanic gets gimmicky quickly. Kirito is overpowered. I'll just say it. He is. Kirito is a wonderful person. Kirito is great with girls. If Kirito was a girl, he'd be called a Mary Sue, but that's not how online discourse works. My definition of Mary Sue or a Gary Stu is a character that is competent to the point that other characters are not allowed to develop. This isn't true for SAO. Still, competent women get scrutinized and overpowered male protagonists are taken as a given. That's unfortunately the world we live in. Sakana folded her arms.
That doesn't mean Kirito doesn't get obnoxious.
The other seasons get better at this, but in Sword Art Online, the only forces that pose a serious threat to Kirito are the mechanics of the game itself. People have to hack reality to stand a chance against Kirito. It gets stale after a while, that's all.
All of these criticisms are secondary. SAO's biggest flaw is what the camera does whenever a female character is on the screen.
I'll agree that the female characters in SAO are sexual all of the time, Mo said. I would give the show credit for growing out of this phase in later seasons.
But it's not these later seasons we're reviewing here.
Right. With a series of hand motions, Sakana pulled up a segment of the anime. It was like super cool. So cool that it will probably lead to a copyright strike if presented faithfully on YouTube. And a very long GIF if I represented it faithfully on Medium.
In this scene,
Sakana started.
The viewer is led to believe that a girl's longtime friend has died. He died in the middle of town, which, up until this point, had been a PvP-free zone. As far as the viewer knows, the girl is afraid, for herself and for her dead partner. Everyone is worried about what this means for them. Are they safe? Can they no longer escape death by staying in town? Watch here how Asuna immediately goes to confront her. Kirito, meanwhile, hangs back. He's calculating what he needs to do next, how this will affect other players in game. He's unsure how to fix the situation. Asuna and Kirito both care about this girl. They both want to help, but the pair are distinct people. What their help looks like is different.
It's a subtle bit of character work, Mo said.
Sure. Anyway, here's purple-haired ass because that's important right now, I guess. Wow, what I really needed to know about this character in this very moment was not her feelings, but how far up her butt her thighs tend to ride. Do you see a problem, Mo?
Mo shrugged. I mean, it's like 40% of the frame, so it's hard to miss.
There is a time and place for sexualizing all characters, not just women. But when you're sexualizing someone, you're not actually listening to what they have to say. And if women are constantly sexualized, they're never being taken seriously.
The goddess returned the glowing orb that was SAO to its original state.
Not to mention the idea that women are inherently sexual, as if they are responsible for the inability of some men to act appropriately around them is...
backwards.
I was thinking gross.
Distressing.
Rubbled.
Painful. Deleterious. This is just thesaurus.com again. This season of SAO never really drops the habit, and it leads to just the worst scene in the entire season, if not the show itself. Asuna spends the second half of the second season trapped and objectified. She's literally a bird in a cage, and a damsel in distress, and the princess trapped at the top of the tower, all at once. Up until the end of the season, Nobuyuki Sugo has always stopped short of outright sexual assault with Asuna. I mean, it's not like using your wealth to pressure the family of an underage girl into marrying you isn't disgusting enough as it is. What I mean is, there are scenes where Sugo will, like, sniff Asuna's hair or touch her and then back off and go, lol, JK, I'm not a rapist, haha. It's uncomfortable and gross every time. And to the narrative's credit, I think it understands that this is uncomfortable and gross. You'd be surprised at the anime that straight out don't. We'll get to those later. But anyway, in the final fight with Nobuyuki, the CEO decides to drop the pretenses and just cross the line into full-on rape. He gropes and kisses Asuna while Kirito is forced to watch, which of course gives Kirito just the strength he needs to beat the crap out of Nobuyuki and save his wife. He also threatens to tape the in-game footage of the assault to use with and against her in real life when he forces her to get married to him. The fact that the camera sexualizes Asuna, even in this scene, is super disturbing. Rape isn't sexy. Rape isn't edgy. It's disgusting. It's one of the worst, most traumatic things a human being can do to another human being, short of straight up killing them. This scene is why SJWs like myself complain so much about sexualization in media. The camera in this season of SAO is incapable of seeing women outside of being sexual. I wouldn't go so far to say that all women in SAO are nothing but sexual objects, but women are inherently sexual and sexual all the time, even when they're getting raped. It would be impossible to describe in words just how dangerous the ideas put forward by these couple of scenes really are. The idea that the camera forwards that women are always sexual even when they're victims is sexist and used to blame women for their own abuse. In general, you can't use rape as a plot device. I'm not saying no stories should include topics of sexual violence, but broadly speaking, if you have a character that has lived through sexual assault, it can't just be a one-off thing that you do to move your plot along. It especially can't exist to motivate the men around them. To reduce any traumatic event, especially things happening to women, down to a simple motivation boost for men is a disgusting trend. See the long history of fridging female characters, for example. Sexual assault is one of those things that takes up a huge part of any good story it's a part of. You need to handle it with care and respect, and that's not what's happening in this episode of SAO. Having your female lead get raped for drama doesn't fucking make your story more mature. It doesn't show you're able to talk about real issues. It only shows how little you understand about what you're trying to talk about. I get where the thinking is coming from, because I used to think the same way too. You have a thing that's bad, you make the bad thing the villain. Racism is bad, so my villain is going to be a racist. Rape is bad, so my villain is going to be a rapist. I'm not endorsing rape, I'm condemning it. That's the bad guy. You need but listen to the stories of people who have experienced this to realize how reductive and incomplete that logic actually is. And the worst part is, this isn't even the only season that treats sexual assault this way. This is a consistent problem throughout all of SAO's properties. The seasons tend to throw an attempted rape or two to raise the stakes, or whenever the men in this story need something noble to fight for. It's inexcusable. So yeah, SAO, it's got flaws, to say the least.
Well, I guess that settles it. You should be headed back to your own world soon.
Mo frowned. Why?
Well, the answer is obvious enough. Modern isekai all stems from a cheap, rotten show that panders to the male gaze over the well-being of sexual assault victims, which is abhorrent. That's terrible. The leaves are browning because there's poison in the soil. If I were to just destroy SAO here and now, I'd have a chance of saving my realm.
Sakana commanded the glowing orb that was Sword Art Online to flow over to her. Her eyes narrowed as she clasped her hands around the shell. A forceful gust of wind stole the heat from the air. Aside from her voice, all became quiet. She chanted,
Sword Art Online, thou who hast spilled such wretchedness into the soil of my realm, thou shalt cease thy worthless existence and flee to the twisted synapses from which thou wast born.
Wait, Sakana, goddess, just hold on.
Winds of darkness, prose of flame, DD waifus, tropes of shame, I condemn thee, Sword Art Online, for thy crimes against women, decency, and good taste. Thou wilt be erased from the minds of anime fans and executives alike. Never again shall thy filthy name be pronounced on Reddit threads.
I don't actually think SAO is the worst thing ever made.
I'm sorry, what?
SAO has its flaws, no doubt, and when I'm about to talk about the things SAO does right, it's by no means an excuse for those flaws. They are awful. But when the show was pitched to me, it wasn't pitched to me as SAO is a flawed show that mishandles its female characters to the end of the first season. No, it was pitched to me as literally the worst anime ever created by man's undeserving hands. The only reason why SAO is even in this essay is because it's supposed to be the reason why Isekai is the way it is. And if that's the standard, if I'm trying to assess whether or not SAO is the original sin of Isekai, I have to say the answer is no. It's decent sometimes. In a phrase, Sword Art Online is rancid horseshit and nuggets of gold sharing a plate. SAO has competently done themes. They're on the nose, sure, but they're clear and obvious. The second half of the season is about how games can set us free. It uses the player's abilities to fly in Alfheim Online to show us this idea. Likewise, Asuna is trapped in a birdcage. The fact that she's in this game, but unable to fly, unfree, can be read as a perversion of the potential of both games and fiction more general. And again, it's a perversion that comes from the government and from corporations. Okay, I won't do it. The first thing Asuna does when she escapes is she heads back into the game and takes to the skies. On her own volition, she too has become free. In fact, everyone who was trapped in SAO with Kirito takes to the skies to challenge the world of Sword Art Online in their own terms. They're also free to do so, and whatever else. It's simple, but how many isekai fail to do even this? Asuna's character was certainly mishandled at the end, but compare her to her competition. Most female leads are either despised by the narrative, we'll get to this one, slaves, we'll get to those, or no personality harem tropes, we'll get to those too. Asuna has character, she has a personality. I've heard it asserted that she's useless, but at least in the first half of the season, that's simply not true. She fights alongside Kirito. She challenges Kirito's assumptions. She's more than the two-dimensional waifu characters we normally see in Isekai, who validate every decision the male lead makes. Kirito is boring, sure. He's obnoxiously cool. He's overpowered. He's a male gamer fantasy, but he maintains an open and healthy relationship with a woman, and it's one of the better parts of the show. I've seen it complained that Kirito's a no-personality self-insert who's always right. And after having consumed just an unspeakable amount of SAO, I can't say that's true. Kirito is Kirito. He's a paragon in the style of Superman or Paddington. He doesn't have arcs because his role in this story is helping others realize their potential. The secondary leads have the arcs, and those arcs are pretty standard. The viewer is encouraged to be like Kirito, as we are encouraged to be like Superman, rather than take his place in this story. I mean, could you imagine if Kirito was a proper self-insert main character? Kirito wouldn't have half the backstory he does because it gets in the way of the self-insert ability. SAO would be way worse. And also your sister will want to suck your dick. Things happen outside of Kirito. Kirito is strong, but he's not literally the center of the multiverse. The circumstances surrounding the characters and their consequences are relevant and touching and thought through. SAO maybe hasn't thought through its premise all that too well, but it has thought through the emotional beats of its entire cast extensively. If you want to learn about SAO and how well it portrays war and PTSD, I'd suggest checking out Posada's Pac-Man's take on it. The fact that he's an unironic Posadist aside, he did a better job on this than I could have. Just because Kirito is usually the strongest person in the room, that by no means makes him the best person in the room for every task at all times. In fact, by the end of the season, he can't get through the final level to save Asuna without teaming up with the people around him. He gets the one-on-one fight with Nobuyuki, but only after he accepts that he might need help to do so. Kirito is given a seed by Kayaba, a program which allows any person from anywhere to run their own VR MMORPG server on their own computers. Individuals and small companies take over where corrupt CEOs left off, and soon anyone will be able to make their own personal worlds and explore their own possibilities. SAO literally argues that the solution to gaming is to take it out of the hand of capitalists and under the control of regular people. Like, again, this is a whole essay. It's coming out. I'm working on. Same genus, different species. SAO isn't Marxist, but that's about as anti-isekai as you can get in terms of mentality, which tends to favor individual action as part of the all-too-common hero fantasy. Most isekai argue that being rich and powerful, taking what you deserve, is a good thing. The typical isekai male power fantasy has no room for democracy or horizontal power structures. In early 2019, Kawahara Reiki, the author of SAO's source material, did an interview with one of the Japanese voice actresses for SAO and the author of the manga Bloom Into You, Nakatini Neo. In response to Nakatini praising Kawahara for the strength of his female characters, Kawahara responded that he plans to give his female characters more strength and more room to grow in the future. He explained that after traveling overseas and receiving criticism for how his work handled female characters, he decided to learn from his mistakes and write stories with a bit more political correctness. Which is to say, he stated he agrees that a character's gender shouldn't determine their role in stories, and women in fiction should be more than trophies for men. He admires how, in English, for example, we have gender-neutral terms like protagonist and antagonist, and admires the fact that in lesbian manga, anime, and light novels, both women can be protagonists, whereas in stories featuring straight romances, the man must be the hero, while the heroine stands to the side. He recognizes that writing stronger female characters doesn't have to mean downplaying male protagonists like Kirito. A month before that, and here's the best part, Kawahara apologized to the voice actors of his show for their discomfort in voicing a sexual assault, one of those terrible sexual assault scenes that we've complained about already. Kawahara recognizes that he's used sexual assault as a crutch in the past, since all the fantasy stories he grew up with did the same thing, and he has since stated that he wants to avoid using sexual assault like a plot device in his future work. The writer of SAO has evolved over time, and SAO has evolved with it. Yet, isekai in general hasn't changed. It hasn't kept pace with SAO's improvements. If anything, isekai as a whole has been folding in on itself, while Kawahara has been working to make SAO more inclusive and applicable to everyone. If SAO started this current strain of isekai, it's since moved far beyond it. I find it hilarious that the weebs who hated SAO never really had a problem with how the show treated women. They maintain that SAO hasn't changed one bit, and it's still the same poorly written mess it was when it started. If anything, the fact that SAO is PC now makes it worse in the eyes of anime fans. The simple fact is this: SAO has never been like the standard run-of-the-mill isekai. Kawahara Reiki has read Alice in Wonderland. I mean, there's an entire season of the show based on the story. It's a story for another time. I really want to write this SAO essay. I'm sorry. Still, if we see Alice in Wonderland as the archetypical of the world story, Sword Art Online shares more thematic similarities with Alice's adventures in the underground than it does with most other isekai. Specifically, Sword Art Online doesn't reject the real world with its virtual ones. SAO argues the exact opposite. Alice in Wonderland argued that the reason why Alice's dreams were so important was because it was a dream. It argued that there's inherent good in fiction through its ability to provide joy to children and adults alike. SAO takes that exact same theme and updates it, broadening the definition of fiction to include technology. The anime again argues that the only reason why other worlds are important, the only reason why fiction is important, is that fiction, in a way, is real. How we interact with fictional worlds is real. The friendships we make online through games are real. SAO not only argues that we can't escape reality, but that we don't need to, because fiction is reality, and that's what makes fiction great. To call SAO escapist is to fundamentally miss the point, actually, which is hard to imagine for a show that has spent the last decade being torn apart line by line by every anti-tuber up and down the block. You're not running away from your crappy life to meet your otherworld waifu. The game is your life, or at least a valid part of it. She's not your waifu, she's your flesh and blood girlfriend, and you should act like this is real life with ups and downs, not some game. This isn't a case of 2D better than 3D. This is using the fictional world as a tool to finding a real, meaningful, and healthy relationship with an actual woman. SAO maintains that ignoring fiction and focusing on the real world leads to melancholy. By not being able to explore ourselves, we miss out on a huge number of potential experiences and feelings. At the same time, throwing ourselves into fiction and ignoring reality is also untenable. Each and every one of our lives is valuable in some way and worth going back to after we play a game or read a book. SAO argues that leaving the real world behind is as impossible as it is immoral. In episode 23, Kirito states,
I guess I figured, in the virtual world, no one knows anything about anyone. So I dove right in and thought it was where I belonged. But those 2 years I spent trapped in SAO taught me something. The difference between a real and a virtual world is slim at best. It's a waste of time asking people who they really are. All you can do is accept them as is, and have faith in them. 'Cause in the end, whoever you think they are, that's who they really are.
Again, the dialogue is not the best. The last sentence is kind of awkward, blah, blah, blah. What with, repeating they are kind of twice. But the point of Isekai is that there is a difference between the virtual world and the real world. And in most Isekai, in the real world, you're nothing. You're a loser, shut-in neat who can't get a girlfriend. There's no hope for you. But in the virtual world, you're a badass. You get all the girls. You're a level 31 magic knight with a spirit sword. SAO takes that and it says no. It says if you're confident, popular, and outgoing online, you have that capacity in the real world too. That person that people like online exists off screen too. And if you're a harasser or an abuser online who gets a kick out of making people miserable in a virtual context, or if you justify gross behavior in a fantasy context, it's not good enough to say you're not that person IRL. You are that person IRL, whether you know it yet or not. It's all just you. At risk of sounding cheesy here, Kirito is an empowering protagonist for me. Not necessarily because he's a nerd like me, we're not very similar, and I don't game. But I found Kirito empowering more in the sense that I write behind an online persona, like projecting a level of confidence and expertise that doesn't translate in real life. I have accomplishments online that I tell no one about, and it's always easy to think of them as belonging to who I am outside of, this world. The world of my online content, which I'm apparently stuck in until I can figure this out. Hello?
You bet you are, bullshit hero.
But SAO, through Kirito, argues that what I can do in this world, I can do in real life after I close my laptop. It's a message that makes me feel good, and I, honest to God, can't name an anime that argues this exact point better than this one. SAO is less a reactionary shitfest and more a decent show brought down by how much it feels the need to copy tropes from other stories that are actually reactionary shitfests to the core. Kawahara Reiki wrote a ton of assumptions about how stories are supposed to work and how women are supposed to be into his art. He went through a phase where all his dialogue was cringe, his protagonists were simplistic and overdone, his philosophy was poorly thought out,
all writers go through some version of this, but not all writers have the misfortune of publishing their cringe phase into one of the most successful media franchises of all time. If SAO has an original sin, it's that. Kawahara going on record saying he's trying to be better doesn't undo the harm his old work caused, but it happens so rarely that he absolutely deserves some credit and praise. Not so much credit and praise that we forget about the actual like female and LGBT plus authors who've been getting this right since forever, but you know, some credit. Sakana made a small motion with her finger. A tiny speck of light broke off from the summoning seed and made its way to Mo.
Have you seen this?
He shook his head.
This is Sword Art Online Progressive. It's Reki Kawahara's latest attempt to rewrite the story of Sword Art Online week by week, with all the lessons you'd say he's learned in his time writing the original.
Mo cupped the little speck in his palm. No bullshit?
You are the bullshit hero, but okay.
I'm looking forward to reading this.
Uh-huh.
Sakana frowned. I want to know how he handles his themes this time around. How he addresses the problematic elements he knows exist in his earlier work. How he gives characters like Asuna more agency. Does he change the events of the original? Does he give us more female perspectives? Is it an aesthetic change that fails to do anything different?
It's your time to kill.
Mo's eyes flashed with a paralyzing intensity. I will consume anything that will make a good essay. Hear me? Anything.
You're creeping me out.
SAO is a show with mediocre writing written by a guy who hacked together a web novel once for a contest that happened to take off from there. It's got things going on in it that are worth talking about. It has characters you'll either relate to or not, and relationships you'll either love or hate. It dips into the problematic tropes of its genre a little too many times to ignore, and it's critical we understand what a show this popular does wrong and why it's harmful. That's about it. It's not the worst show ever made. It's not even the worst isekai ever made. It's literally just okay. It's one of those things you watch, you recognize how it's problematic, and you move on. The fact that AniTube has shot on this show for 10 fucking years and not once has worthwhile conversation come out of it is frustrating, but not surprising. Sakana smiled.
AniTube must feel like a whole other world to you. An isekai, if you will. What with all your spicy takes all the time.
I swear it's involuntary, Mo said. It's like a medical condition. I have to be contrary, or at least I think the only things worth writing down are things that haven't been said before, or enough.
Sure.
Her mischievous smile widened.
Would you say you feel like you've gone through the looking glass?
Mo blinked. Alright, smartass, just give me the next show already.
You've reached the end of part 1 of Bullshit No Yuusha. Suffering from capitalist alienation, I reincarnate to an anime crit essay. Thanks so much for reading. If you like that, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Show some love. You can check the description. I've got everything in there from my Patreon and Twitter to the text-based / script version of this if you wanted to read that instead. I'd like to thank Kranas Angel for all the work they put in to help me actually make this happen. They read this over multiple times. They listened to my very long and incoherent rants that eventually became this essay, and they kind of helped me sort through it. And they provided an excellent voice for my goddess of all of isekai itself, Sakana. She's very fun to write, she's very fun to draw, she's very fun to have exist, and I'm glad that I got some help in bringing her to life.
I'm especially excited for all of you guys who can finally experience this thing that that has happened to me since December. is I think the best I can put it. I've got a lot more. This was harder than I thought it was. I've got like a lot of thoughts and ideas that need to go into an essay, but I think after a very long time, I've got it to a point where it's like, yes, this is definitely worth saying. So I guess what I'm really trying to say is I can't wait to see you guys in part 2. Love you lots. Wash your hands. Stay safe. See you then. Asuna spends the second half of the second season trapped and objectified. She's literally a bird in a cage and a damsel in distress and the princess trapped at the top of the tower all at once. Up until the end of this. Why are there fucking trucks driving around?